folks. Today, I have an interview with Robin Herford, who is the director of The Woman in Black, which has just returned to New York City. I went to see it this weekend. I was blown away. Welcome, Robin. Nice to have you on the show.
Lovely to be here, Roger. Thank you.
Well, I want to start, Robin, by saying that, this is theater the way I think it should be. It's storytelling, correct? It's literally storytelling, and it's done in such a brilliant way that I was floored. I'd seen the movie, never seen the action. I've never read the novel, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but it is perfectly paced for the folks out there. The performances are wonderful. It's a great story that will scare the bejesus out of you. I've never been scared in a theater like this. Now, you've directed this play for 30 years. It's the second longest running play in London's West End, and you've completed 12 national tours. What an achievement. How does it feel to have accomplished so much with this material?
I'm just incredibly lucky. I commissioned the play to be written in 1987. I was running the theatre in Scarborough where Sir Alan Ayckbourn holds court, and he had been invited to go to the National Theatre for 2 years, and I was his associate director. So he said, why don't you look after the theatre while I'm away? And that meant programming, finding the new plays, putting them on. And we got to the end of my second year, and I've been terribly careful with the money. And my general manager said to me, "Now, whatever you do, spend all your grant." We get a little grant from the government and from local authorities to help run. But you've got to spend it. If you don't spend it, you don't get it next year. So I thought, right, okay. But I had my program all worked out and just a little bit of money left in the budget. So I thought, okay, we'll do an extra play. So we were coming up to Christmas, and I had a children's play running morning and afternoon in the main auditorium. But we had what was grandly called a studio, but actually was doubled as the bar and the restaurant. It was just a space at the end of the building. And so I thought, right, we'll do a play in there in the evenings. We can only seat 70 people, but we'll put it on for our loyal adults who come and see it. And so I asked my friend and assistant director, Stephen Mallatrat, who had also written plays for the theatre before. I said, I want you to write me a ghost story for Christmas. And you can either adapt an existing one or you can write an original one. But I've only got enough money for 4 actors. And the set and costumes can't cost more than £1,000.
Wow.
So $1,300 or something. So, and we'll do it in the bar. So that was his brief. And, because I think ghost stories at Christmas sort of go together.
Yeah.
He came back a couple of days later and said, have you read Susan Hill's novel, Woman in Black, which had come out maybe 2 or 3 years before? I said, no, I've heard of it, but I hadn't read it. And so I read it overnight, and it's only 120 pages or something. And I said, what a fantastic story. But you can't have been listening because there are about 15 characters. And he said, well, I've had an idea about that. I might be able to give you some change. And he went away and wrote a play for just 2 speaking actors, which followed as closely as possible the story of Susan Hill's novel. The film and other versions have deviated spectacularly from the novel, which is, to my mind, a pity. It was the one bit of advice I gave to it, which was just stick to the story because it's fantastic. So what you see on stage is, in effect, that comes direct from Susan's novel. And Stephen just adapted it, made sort of, it's set in the sort of 1880s, 1920s. There are a couple of time scales, but he wrote sort of pastiche Victorian Gothic language to convey that. And here we are. It ran for 3.5 weeks, and we could only fit 70 people in. And the thing that really surprised us was that people came out scared. I mean, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which hadn't really been, we thought, well, we'll do a ghost story because that's the genre you do at Christmas time. and obviously we hadn't shied away from the big moments, but we thought people would sort of take it in their stride, but people were quite disturbed by it. And forgive the laughter. I'm not really a sadist, but I did quite enjoy the fact that some people, that it got to people. That's really what it was. It got to people.
It's really an amazing backstory, and just shows you how when you're restricted financially to do something, you become more creative.
Is absolutely the point, Roger. It's absolutely the point. If I'd said we got a budget of 35,000 and we can have an unlimited cast, I'm sure he'd have done a terrific job, but it wouldn't be running now.
Yeah, it makes it impossible to put a production up like that unless you have that kind of money every time. And again, when I walked in, I was surprised at the setup, and I was surprised, just at the way the story's told and how quickly it picks up steam, and you're completely wrapped into this amazing, scary story. And okay, I'm not a sadist either, but I did enjoy, people's reaction in the audience. My wife was right next to me in the audience, terrified. So I'm not a sadist, but I did kind of enjoy that she was so hooked. Now, you've approached this material over the years repeatedly. It's gone on tours. It's been to Asia, Australia, other parts of the world. When you approach, and you've directed, I assume all of them or most of them, but when you approach this material, let's say in Asia or in other parts of the world, do you adapt it? Has it changed much from your approach, or is it pretty much the same as it was when it opened?
I don't change it, but the actors do. Not in any substantive way. So I mean, they don't change the lines or whatever. If I'm directing it in Japanese, the actors do it in Japanese, and I have to try and follow as best I can. But what I have found with this play has been the most incredible gift to me, because it was a tiny little show. And I spent the next year trying to get a production in London, which I finally managed to do. And we finally ended up at this beautiful little theatre called The Fortune, which only seats 400 people, and it's been there for over 30 years until the pandemic stopped it.
Wow!
It's restarted, but it had its 18 months out, like most of us. But the point is that I've learned so much from directing it. You cast two new people in the play, and they bring their own imaginations, their own intelligences, their own prejudices, their own beings, really. And so the play changes subtly. Sometimes people say, I had no idea. I couldn't remember. I've seen it before. I didn't remember it being so funny. And other people say, I hadn't remembered it being so moving. And so it changes. And it's enabled me to cast against type, which I always enjoy doing. I trained as an actor, and that's helped, I think, because basically I see my job as a director is getting out of the way of the actors. You show them what you want, and with as few words as you can, and then let them do it. And yeah.
That's wonderful. And one of my questions was going to be about your work as an actor, because I know you're an accomplished actor, and you definitely understand that process. So that helps tremendously with taking it to different venues or different places across the world. When you audition actors across the world, or maybe in a New York production as opposed to recasting in London, what kind of things are you looking for? What do you look for in an actor who's going to bring these changes to the role?
I look first and foremost for an actor I can communicate with. The meeting is so much more important than what they actually present as a self-tape or as a live audition. I talk to them quite a lot before we actually get down to doing any work at all, because I just want to know whether they're people who maybe share similar enthusiasms and passions theatrically. I like to cast actors without ego. I like to cast actors who will enjoy a laugh, who will actually relish the proposition and will work hard. And hopefully I get it right. I was interesting. 3 years ago, I opened the show in Cleveland for a tour that went to Cleveland and Chicago and Pasadena and Seattle, and played sort of a minimum of 4 weeks in each venue. And I'd come over and done a week's casting with a New York casting director, which was very interesting. But I hadn't quite found my Arthur Kipps. But there was an actor called Bradley Armacost who was performing in DC at the time, and so he couldn't get across to the auditions that we were holding in Chicago. But he sent a self-tape, and I saw the self-tape, and I thought, oh, he looks an interesting guy. But I said, look, I really need to meet him, even if it's over Zoom or Skype or whatever, and maybe we can read a bit of the play over Skype. And so we arranged this, and we fixed a time, and he called me, and he said, I'm really sorry, Robin, I'm not at home in Chicago. I'm in the airport departure lounge at Tampa Bay because my plane's been grounded by fog.
Wow.
So I thought, well, there's no way I can audition him, getting sort of, it must be told I cannot carry the burden any longer, you can't do that in an airport lounge. So we just chatted, but we got on so well, and I thought, oh yes, and I looked at his CV, which is as long as your arm. So I cast him, and he was fantastic, and he joined the family, and that's what it is. We have a family of actors, and there's some very, very diverse actors have played parts. Joseph Fiennes from Shakespeare in Love.
Really?
It was his very first job out of drama school. I cast him out of
wow.
drama school.
That's great.
And then Martin Freeman, who went on to do rather grand things like The Office and The Hobbit and Fargo and things. So
amazing.
But both totally different people, and totally different types of actors, really.
Yeah.
But they brought their own thing. I mean, Martin was just very, very funny. I mean, he was hilarious. But it works, it works, provided you get to the truth of it, provided you actually get to the truth and the pain. The older man is in severe pain. He's on the verge of a nervous breakdown, and he desperately needs someone to help him. And he comes, to get a little bit of help with public speaking, and he finds a man who says, well, I can't coach you how to speak interestingly for 5 hours. It just wouldn't work, but maybe I can help you another way. What if we make a play of it, and I play you as a young man and you play all the people you met, because we're going back 30 years in the younger man. So that's what happens, and they form this extraordinary bond.
I mean, the range of the older character on stage, the actor, has to be so wide, so broad. And in the production in New York, just to see those sudden shifts of characters so clearly portrayed on stage, and to refer back to your humor, God, I think we have to have a little bit of humor in a play like that. It's necessary to take that, breather. Yeah. Say, okay, I'm ready for the next, bad moment. Yes, but yes. It's beautiful. This New York production, is this? I take it this is your second one. How is it different from the first? Am I right in that?
It's the same actors.
It is.
So the production here in the McKittrick. We launched it in January 2020, and so we played for just 2 months. So a handful of people really had come to see it, because we can only fit 150 in. So they played for 2 months, and it did very well and got some lovely reviews and awards and things. And then, of course, typically, just as you're getting going, you get stopped by a pandemic, which no one saw coming. But it's the same characters. But what's lovely is that, all right, they've had 18 months off, away from it, and that's often no bad thing. I've often come back to productions of plays, not only this one, but many others as well. And you give it a rest, and you come back, and actually you just see it afresh. And I hope we've just made it a little bit sharper, and and more itself.
Well, it was sharp, and it was only the second performance, and I found the pacing so great. It was perfect. The length of the play, which is what, an hour and 40 minutes, was perfect. I really enjoyed that. Let's go back to the concept of a play in a bar, because that was the first play that I've seen since COVID, which we'll talk briefly about later. But that was the first live play that I've seen. And then the next day, I went to see The Weir, also at a bar. Connor.
Person.
Yes. And it was fabulous too, but it was also in a bar. And I thought, wow, I made my comeback at 2 bars, seeing live theater. But let's talk about the bar, because I think just that whole experience at the McKittrick is so fabulous. I mean, it's a beautiful venue, and really is just a great setup. Has it played outside of a bar? Do you see it always in a bar? Tell me about that.
No, this is very much a departure, playing it in a bar. I mean, the first production in the studio was played in a space that doubled as a bar, but this was an attempt, in a way, to go back to its roots.
Yeah.
And play, it's sort of Woman in Black Unplugged, it's sort of the acoustic version. But we have played, I mean, those 12 UK tours we're talking about, we've played theatres that seat 2,200 people. We've played, the Liverpool Empire, the Manchester Palace, and we've played all the wonderful traditional houses, the Bristol Old Vic Theatre Royal, the Bath Theatre Royal, lovely old sort of 18th century playhouses. And it works wonderfully in an old theatre, because the old theatre is actually what. When Stephen first wrote it, he didn't write it in the theatre. And I said, well, why don't you just place it in a theatre? Because then you've got an excuse for not an excuse, you've got a reason for all the technical assistance that sound and light can give you. And we use the simplest of theatrical rough magic. I mean, there's a gauze stretched across the back of the stage.
So good.
And you light from in front and you can't see through it.
Yeah.
You light from behind and the gauze disappears. So reveals and spooky moments are quite they're manufactured.
I've never been to a play that's a horror or ghost story or anything like that actually frightened me. And what you did with this production and what the actors did, there were moments of just walking around, but it's that anticipation that is going to hit you across the head at any given moment. And I would hold my wife's hand because I knew she was about to scream, which is okay, but it was my way to warn her that this was going to happen.
Yes.
I saw the film version, and I haven't read the novel. I've now seen this version, which is, again, folks, you have to see it. You have to see it at the McKittrick, because when you're sitting there in that intimate space, it makes a huge difference. But what might be, without giving anything away, what might be some of the differences between, let's say, the movie, which more people are familiar with, and the play? And again, I don't want to give anything away, but
no. Well, the movie does what movies usually do: change the story.
They did.
And we start with Arthur Kipps. In our play, Arthur Kipps starts as a bright, young, confident lawyer working in London. He's obviously in with a good firm. The boss likes him and says, I want you to go up and do a bit of business for me. I want you to attend the funeral of one of our oldest clients and sort out her papers and bring the important stuff back to this office. And he said, oh, fine, okay, right, so off he goes. And he's a can-do guy, he'll always chat to people on the train. He'll always, he's like a young sort of retriever Labrador puppy, he's always, hello, I'm so-and-so,
Yeah.
and he's great. And then he gets faced with something which he had not expected, something which challenges his whole belief system. He is forced to acknowledge the possibility of the existence of ghosts. And he has been completely, rational skeptic about the matter. And so it means turning his belief system on its head. It also requires enormous courage. And courage is a huge factor in this play. It was the time sequence is mainly about 1950, which is when we first meet the two characters. And then they go back 30 years to 1921, which is just after the end of the First World War. And the second period is just after the end of the Second World War. So they have Kip's, the young lawyer, was too young to serve, but he has examples, brothers, uncles, fathers maybe, who served in the trenches, who just were up to their knees in water, and when the whistle went, they had to go over the top, regardless of the fact that there was a machine gun pointing straight at them. It was it took extraordinary courage, and I think that sort of is there in that quality of an English stiff upper lip, and we don't make a fuss, and we just get on with it. And yeah.
I was going to say, as far as directing, because you've also had quite a few projects you've worked on, what is it about the ghost genre that appeals to you? I mean, obviously you picked it for the Christmas presentation 30 plus years ago, whatever, but I'm sure you have a fascination and love for ghost stories. What is it that appeals to you about that?
Yes, I do. I mean, I've never seen a ghost personally, but during rehearsals with the however many couples of actors I've now rehearsed into this play, the subject often comes up, and I'd say, where do you stand as far as ghosts are concerned? And I've had some pretty terrifying stories come back. I haven't experienced a ghostly manifestation. My wife, we were living in a very old 17th century cottage on the moors up in Yorkshire, just outside Scarborough. And she was convinced that there was a presence in the cottage. Benign, perfectly benign. But one morning she was raking out the ashes of the log fire that we heated ourselves by. And she just sensed someone coming into the room. And was perfectly happy. My wife was perfectly at ease. And after a while, it just went away. But she was very adamant that something had happened. I'm a wimp as far as horror movies are concerned. I'm a complete wimp. I've never seen The Exorcist. I've never seen Alien. And all the more modern manifestations. I'm not a blood and guts man at all, but I love what I love about this show is that it's a human story. It's about a human tragedy, and how the supernatural intervenes. It comes out of extreme grief and sorrow and loss, and humanity, and that's what interests me. And so I've done a couple of different adaptations of The Turn of the Screw, the Henry James novel, and in both of those It's the sort of it's the humanity that exists within the story that sparks my interest.
I love that. I think that's great. And you're right. It is, they do pull you into their humanity. The story is there, but they do pull you into, the suffering and the fear and things like that. And that's
Yes.
exactly what theater is about, is just sharing that emotion. I want to touch the subject of, I'm sorry, did you say?
I was just going to say, I mean, I would love to expand further, but if I did that, there would be spoiler alerts. And I just think the best thing to do is to come and see it.
I think the best thing to do is to go see the show. Without a doubt. I highly recommend it. Experience it for yourself. It's unique to this venue, but it's consistent with the story. And the beautiful thing is, and this brings me into the whole COVID conversation, which won't be long, but I do want to touch upon it. It's such a nice feeling to be back in a theater, seeing live theater. It's such an incredible, I mean, you guys or the McKittrick was very, very conscious about COVID protocols. You had to show an ID to get in, had to wear a mask. Phenomenal. I felt totally safe and comfortable in that setting. But as far as COVID is concerned, Robin, just curious, were you working on any productions throughout the world that you planned and now they've been pushed back to now? Tell us a little bit about the logistics of that, because I'm sure that happened at some point, not just in London.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm 74 and I've been at this game for quite a long time, but I've never had 5 shows running at the same time. And that was what the situation was in March 2020. Wow. And then on March the 16th, I had no shows running at all. So I had no income. I mean, it's for a freelance theatre director, for freelancers, and theatre is made up. I mean, actors are all freelancers, and the creatives, the directors, the designers, the lighting designers. They're all stage management. They're all freelance. And so it was a terrible time. Yeah. But we're hopefully coming out the other end. I thought, 2 weeks, 2 months off, 2 or 3 months, and then we'll get back. That's nothing desperate. I can survive for that. Quite glad of the break, really. but then it went on and on, and you thought, is this ever going to end? And that was a worry. That was a worry. I had a new play that called A Bunch of Amateurs that was created by there's a guy called Ian Hislop who writes for Private Eye, which is a satirical magazine in London, and he had written this lovely play, of which a film was made a few years back. But I was just about to launch this. And 2 weeks away from starting rehearsals, all fully cast, and that's gone, I'm afraid. But I have managed to get back The Woman in Black. It was in the middle of a UK tour when COVID hit, so I've restarted that. And I've restarted in the West End as well. And I've also restarted another of my productions, an Acorn that I was doing at the time, Registered and Speaking, which has played at its original theatre in Sonning, and now then into London for a brief spell. So it's coming back. It's on its way.
Well, I'm really thrilled that it's coming back. I'm thrilled that it came back to New York. Robin, I want to thank you. What a wonderful story. It's such a great theater story to hear how this evolved and where it is.
It's being in the right place at the right time. It could have happened to anyone, and I really mean that. The reason I direct the shows is because, well, first of all, it's a good source of income, and secondly, I believe in it. I believe in it because, as you were saying at the beginning, it's what theatre is. Yeah, and you need 2 planks and a passion. The 2 planks of the stage, and the passion is the story and the desire and the skill with which to tell it.
Well, whichever way it came together, I'm happy it did. I wish you the best of luck and success, continuing to bring that story out. and bring it to wherever you can. And to the folks out there, I know I've said it a few times and I'll say it again. Go see it. It's here until January, right? Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Until January. So you have until January to see it. If you don't want to see it for Halloween, see it then for some other holiday, but it's definitely here. Robin, I wish you the best. Thank you for doing this interview. And I hear you're going back home. Is that right?
I fly back tonight. Yes.
Oh, you
Yes.
do? Well, have a safe flight and make sure to wear the mask so that people
Oh,
don't
yeah.
they don't get
I
crazy on the plane.
just have to say one thing. The mask wearing in New York is so much more impressive than it is in the UK, and I commend all New Yorkers because it's made it so much more pleasant to live. You just feel safer.
You do. I totally love it. And you know, and hopefully I will get to London soon. If I do, I'll make sure to go see it at the West End. I would love that. So thank you, Robin. You have a wonderful trip and much success with this wonderful production.
Thank you so much, Roger. It's been a real pleasure.